Good morning. This morning, I want to talk to you a little bit about mental health because mental health is an increasing issue that we are dealing with in the world around us. And certainly, we are seeing it on the other side of a worldwide pandemic. We're seeing it in higher rates and higher prevalency among younger and younger people. And so it's worth talking about. One of the things that I find in pastor world is that people will often want to come talk to me about their mental health. And there's nothing wrong with that. By all means, if you have a pastor, if you have a spiritual guide or leader of some kind, you should be able to talk with them about it. However, if your pastor is telling you that you shouldn't seek help beyond them, that is where I would disagree, and I would disagree very strongly. I would say there's a big problem there. There was a day and an age, 100, 150, 200 years ago, where the town pastor, the reverend, also usually was the school teacher, and they were the most educated person that was around. Those days are long past. The pastor is no longer the most educated person that is around, and there are far more people who are educated in much more massive ways about mental health, and specifically about mental health. There are psychologists, psychiatrists, counselors, mental health professionals that exist in this world that we have good access to. And so one of the things that will happen sometimes is people will come to talk to me, and I'll realize that there's some stuff going on that's kind of at a deeper level than what I am trained to help somebody with. And what I'll say is, look, let's talk about these things, but for this thing, I'm going to refer you to somebody who I trust, and I'm going to encourage you to get in contact with that person because they are somebody who was trained in a much more specific area that can help you way more than I can. And I think it's important for pastors to be willing to do that, to say, look, that's beyond my level of training. I have a couple examples today that I wanted to share with you that I think help illustrate what we often do with our pain, with our tragedy, with our mental health, and why we shouldn't do that and why we should seek help from professionals. One of the things that we often do is we compartmentalize things. We go through something really painful or something tragic, and what we do is we kind of push it down deep, we squash it, we put it in a box somewhere, and we stick it on a shelf, and we say, okay, I'm not going to deal with that thing anymore. One of the things that I've been doing with my time lately is working with a fire company. And something that I learned not too long ago was about a process called compartmentalization. And what essentially that means is it's possible for you to have a fire in a house. And the houses that we build today are built so well with such high quality, with such good technology that it's possible to get a very good airtight seal, even in an interior bedroom of a house. And so let's say that there is a fire that starts and it's in a bedroom, and you close the bedroom door and you run out of the house and you call 911. It's possible that that bedroom is so airtight with really good windows and good door and a well-fitting door and the carpet coming up to the bottom of the door that the fire that's in that bedroom is being starved of oxygen. Now, a fire needs spark, ignition, it needs fuel, and it needs oxygen in order to survive. And so when that room is sealed up so tight it doesn't give it oxygen, what you end up doing is you starve the fire. And instead of the fire getting larger and seeing a lot more flames, it gets smaller, goes into something called decay, but it produces a lot of smoke. Now, what can happen is that somebody will come running up and they'll break a window and they'll just let oxygen into the room, or they'll come into the house and they'll swing open the door and let oxygen in. And when that happens, you get something called a flashover or a smoke explosion, where all of that unburnt smoke, that unburnt fuel that is smoke, ignites and you have an explosion. And it gets really messy, right? Sometimes we compartmentalize our mental health, our tragedy, our pain, our suffering. We put it on that shelf and we say, I'm not going to open it. And then for whatever reason, we decide to break the window, open the door wide. And boy, we just make a huge mess. We explode over all the stuff around us. And that's not really very good either, because we haven't actually helped ourselves, and we certainly haven't helped our relationships with the people around us, and we haven't helped anybody else. Well, in the fire department, what we would say is the right thing to do is to be prepared to break the window or to open the door, which means that we would get firefighters there with an attack line, a hose. waiting outside the door so that when you open the door, they can begin to use the hose, or you'd have them waiting outside the window so when you break the window, you can use the hose immediately and begin to cool the room down. You get the right tools before you go opening that room up and letting the fire do whatever it wants. The same thing is true in mental health. When you have that sort of pain and that sort of tragedy that you've kind of put on a box somewhere, if you just go ahead and open it, it might end up being really messy, really hurtful, really painful. It might kill some things around you. And I speak from experience. I speak as somebody who has lost 2 daughters. I speak as somebody who, after losing the first daughter, refused to go to any sort of counseling. I didn't believe in it. I didn't want it. I had a bad experience with it when I was a kid. So I didn't want to talk to anybody. And when I would try to open that door, it was so messy and so painful, and I was so angry. And it wasn't until my wife convinced me to go talk to somebody that I was able to get the right person, happened to be a counselor, who could be there with me at the door, ready to engage whatever happened when we opened the door. My encouragement to you is to consider getting the right tools available to you. And this isn't just true of the fire world. One of the things that I was trained in a long time ago was to be a first responder in the wilderness, a wilderness first responder. So that when we took people on backpacking trips or canoe trips or caving trips, things like that, we could render first aid if need be. And one of the things we learned about was what happens if you get impaled? You know, whether it's depression you're dealing with or it's some sort of dysphoria, it's something in your past that is really painful. It can feel a lot like you've been impaled by something. In the wilderness, when you're impaled, when you're far from a hospital, or even around here in your backyard, if you were to have an accident and a tree branch were to impale you or something, what would be the right thing to do? The right thing to do would not be to just yank it out right away. What we do is we take gauze and padding and bandages and we sort of stabilize the thing that has impaled us. It's sort of like we try to get as much of the bleeding stopped that's happening right now. We stabilize that thing that's hurting you, and then we transport you to the hospital where somebody who has all the right tools, all the right training, all the right experience, all the right table and room and sterile environment and all of that can actually remove the object and do the repairs internally that you need. If you were to just pull that object out in a backpacking environment or even in your backyard, the damage you could do would be catastrophic. And that, in some ways, that seems to be working against our grain. Sometimes what we want to do is we feel that pain, we feel that anguish, that mental, whatever it is, and we want to pull it out. We want to get it done. And what we end up doing again is creating a worse wound and waiting to get the right care and the right people in place. That's not always easy. Sometimes we want to do our own thing. I want to encourage you today as somebody who comes to the church or is a part of the church in some way to consider the fact that God has given us access to good medical care for a reason. When my son broke his arm, I could have sat there and we could have just prayed that God would heal his arm. And maybe God would do a miracle and suddenly his bones would have relined up and it would have been all good. No surgery needed. But in reality, God placed an urgent care 5 minutes from my house so that my son could receive the medical attention he needs, get transferred to a hospital so they could have the surgery needed to be casted and get pins in his arm so that down the road he has got a stronger, better chance of having a completely normal use of his arm. God has put those things in place for a reason. So while there's nothing wrong with praying for a miracle, let's use our wisdom that God has given us to also use the tools that he has put in place around us. Whether it is depression that you're dealing with, whether it is anxiety, or it is dysphoria of some kind, whether it is pain from a recent loss, or maybe an old loss. Maybe you have a relationship that is going away right now. Maybe you're in the midst of a divorce. I want to encourage you to take the time to look for mental health professionals that can help guide you through this. By all means, contact me. Let me know what I can do to be of assistance to you if you want to talk, if you want to engage the spiritual side of things. But let's not forgo the other side. Remember, too, that God has a plan. Whether it's at the creation of the world, God creating the world over the course of 6 days or 6 steps, God clearly has a plan put in place that builds on each other. Or whether it's in the Old Testament where we're told that God praises the men of Issachar because they looked around, they knew the times, and they understood what they had to do. We too need to be people that can look around, understand what's going on around us, and know what we have to do. And part of that is access to these professionals that are out there. It is silly for us to try and do these things on our own. And we talked about this in church just a few weeks ago about how our culture seems to push us to be that Rambo, Rocky sort of figure, right? Where we do it by ourselves. We pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. And I even hear that verbiage sometimes when I hear people talk to their parents or other people about mental health struggles. Some people don't believe that it's real. And some people just think, well, can't you just feel better? Can't you just believe something different? And the honest truth of the matter is, no, that is not the way that it works. So, as a community of believers, as Christians worldwide, we need to take this seriously. Mental health is a very serious thing. When I was a kid growing up, my mom used to, as long as I had done well, once a marking period. We had marking periods back then. I don't think they have marking periods anymore. Maybe they do. There was 4 a year. But if I was doing well in school, if I had, done a pretty good job of listening to the rules, which was a little hit or miss sometimes, Mom would give me a mental health day. And what that meant was I got to skip school. Well, it's not really skipping, right? Because she turned an excuse in for me. So it's nothing illegal. But regardless, I got to stay home from school, and Mom took me. We might have gone skiing or something else. And we did something fun as a mental health day to just take a break and relax. We all need that. We all need to find those mental health days. And even God commands us, hey, the Sabbath, keep it holy. The Sabbath is a day of rest. The Sabbath is a day that you don't do the things that you normally do. You take a break from those things. Just like when God created the world, on the seventh day he rested, he took a break. You are also called to take that break, to take that mental health day, whatever you want to call it, whatever makes you feel good about it. We need to take those things. So, this isn't really a devotional in the same way that we've been doing devotionals, but I felt like it was something that needed to be shared, and I needed you to know it is a good thing for you to seek the sort of professional help that you might need. There's no shame in it. And I say that not just as a person who is in spiritual leadership and trying to encourage you to find the right help and not just the spiritual help. I say that as a person who has gone through unbelievable loss. And the only way that I've gotten through that is by having somebody who was a professional to talk to. On this last screen, after I get off of here, I'm going to just put a couple of numbers, a couple of contact places that you can have in your belt if you need that tool to talk to somebody. And always shoot me an email, leave a comment in the messages, and I'll do my best to connect you where you need to be. I hope that you have a fantastic day today.